Welcome to the Grammar Grapevine. I'm your host Chelsea, and this is your go-to podcast for staying updated, meeting new faces and hearing their stories from the Hunter Valley Grammar School community. In this week's episode, I'm joined by HVGS icon Paul Dillon, and we dive deep into his career and reveal the truth about drugs and alcohol. Stay tuned! We acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land, the Wonnarua people, and pay respects to elders past and present. Their traditions of storytelling and knowledge sharing continue to inspire and enrich our school community. Just a disclaimer, this episode contains topics of drugs and alcohol. Parental guidance is recommended. Well, Paul, you're an expert in drug and alcohol education, the founder and director of Drug and Alcohol Research and Training Australia, and someone who's been working in this field of drugs and alcohol education for over 30 years. You've delivered workshops to schools, communities and organisations across Australia and beyond, written a book, Teenagers, Alcohol and Drugs, and regularly appear in the media as a trusted voice on these issues. And let's not forget, you're known and remembered by students all over the country with over 50,000 Instagram followers to prove it. So we're very happy to have you on the Grammar Grapevine. How are you this morning?
I'm good. I'm very, very happy to be here with you. I'm looking forward to having a chat.
So I listened to you this morning. Obviously, I'm in year 11 and you speak to students years 10 to 12. And do you want to give a brief little recap of what our session was about?
Well, the year 11 one is kind of like that bridging session, because there's the introduction session where I kind of got to win young people over a bit, because I think they come in and not quite know what I'm going to be talking about and how I'm going to be talking about it. And in year 11, it's kind of the bridging. So I do a bit of revision on what I said before. And then I talk about, give an update on vaping, some material on cannabis. And then I have a bit of fun around the brain, because that's always a bit of a fun part to do with young people.
That was my favourite part, to be honest. And so to rewind back to the beginning of your journey in drug and alcohol education, what has sparked your interest in this area?
Well, I was a teacher. I was a teacher for many years, and then I always promised myself I would get out of teaching when I didn't like young people very much, because I don't think you're going to be a very good teacher if you don't like young people. And after 10 years, I kind of had enough for a while. And then I worked in a couple of different things. I worked in PR, I worked in different things. I worked for a publishing company. And then I kind of fell into a job at the National Drug and Alcohol Research Centre, which is at the University of New South Wales, where my job was to take the research that the centre did and to kind of disseminate it to the wider population. And just by pure accident, what happened was a school rang up one day and wanted a researcher to come in and speak about alcohol and the drugs. And not surprisingly, no researcher wanted to go into a school and talk to young people. And my boss at the time said, well, you're a teacher, or you were a teacher, why don't you do it? And that's how it happened. It was an absolute accident. It wasn't something I planned. And I suppose what really kind of changed everything for me, I've been doing it for a few years, and then my family was originally from England, and we had a phone call from my auntie to say that my cousin had started. It was a heroin user. No one knew, and he was a heroin user. And my auntie was very upset, trying to work out what to do. I went to England. I helped him, helped find a treatment program for him. And talking to him, he was an amazing young man who just fell into really dark sides of alcohol and the drugs. And I said to him one day, what would have changed your life? What would have meant that you didn't do some of the things you did? And he turned around and he said, you know what? Everyone gave me information they thought I should have. No one asked me what information I wanted. And that changed everything for me, because all of a sudden I kind of changed the way I presented. I did a lot of work working with young people and trying to find out what they wanted to know. And most of the time, all young people want is to know how to stay safe, how to look after their friends. And that's really kind of the core of what I do, making sure that young people know what to do if something goes wrong.
Yeah, I actually think that's more efficient as well, because if kids, like I know with my parents, if they tell me to not do something, I get more tempted to do it. But if they actually help me know how to do something, I won't be as tempted because they're helping me through it. And looking back at your career so far, how would you say drug and alcohol education has changed over the years?
The biggest thing that's changed is there's so much many more drugs available than there once were. When I first started doing this 30 years ago, there was alcohol, tobacco, cannabis, and a couple of other drugs, but realistically there weren't this wide variety. Now, I mean, the kind of drugs that are around and drug issues like vaping, for example. I mean, vaping wasn't around. Ecstasy, MDMA was a drug that realistically only certain populations would ever kind of have access. Young people, particularly because of the internet now, of course, have so much access to so many things, and also information. But the trouble is with young people, like everybody, what tends to happen is you cherry pick bits of information that you want. So if you want to use drugs, you look for all the information that says drug use is good and you don't look for other. So I think that's the biggest change. Young people have greater access to drugs. There are more different drugs. And they have much greater access to information.
And what would you say is your favourite part of your job?
It depends on how I'm feeling, because I'm getting older, and travelling and speaking to young people I love. I mean, I love working with young people, and I'm very, very lucky because young people seem to respond quite well to what I do. So I get lots of very positive feedback from young people, and that's wonderful. Young people are the best audience. I mean, they can sense a fake very quickly, and if you are not telling them the truth, they certainly will let you know. But I'm very fortunate that young people tend to be very positive to what I do. So I'd have to say that's the best part about what I do. Travelling is not nice because, I travel a lot.
Gets exhausting.
It gets so tiring. And, if I was in my 40s, it most probably would be still pretty much fun. But as you get older, everything starts to get much more difficult.
Yeah. How has your organisation grown and evolved throughout your career where you have come and visited schools?
Well, I now have contact with about 200 schools a year. I speak to about 150,000 young people a year. That's an awful lot of young people, yeah. And as I said, it was not a great plan. I didn't plan, this, I'll do this and I'll do this and I'll do this. It just has kind of evolved over time. The trouble is, DARTA, my organisation, is me. It's not other people. People say, well, why don't you get other people to help you present across the country? But it's very difficult to do because realistically, you've got to find someone who is as passionate about the topic as I am, which is hard. And everyone has their own kind of way of presenting. And I think young people tend to respond to my talks because of the way I present it. I try to put my sense of humour into it, which I think young people appreciate. Yeah. And I don't know if I could train anyone to do that. So that's my big kind of worry at this time of my career is what happens next. Yeah. Because, do I just one day just stop? And what happens then? That's the really hard part to work out what you do next. Especially when you do go to so many schools and you make relationships with so many different student groups, it's hard to find someone that can follow that. Exactly, it would be really difficult. And I think what will happen is when I stop, someone else will just rise to the surface. Someone else will take over. At the moment, there really aren't many people who do what I do. Yeah. Lots of people do mental health and lots of people do cyber safety, but I don't know really anyone else who does what I do. Yeah. So it'd be interesting to see what happens. Yes, time will tell. Time will tell, exactly. And most people listening today year 11 and 12s will already have spoken to you. So for everyone listening who hasn't had a chance to speak to you yet, is there a particular age group or student profile you prefer speaking to and why? Oh, that's a hard one. I love the Year 10 talk that I give because it's the introduction and it's about trying to work out, am I going to win this group of young people over? Because sometimes you do, and it depends on the school. I mean, Hunter Valley is a very easy school to present to. I mean, you don't have young people who are going to be particularly rude or disrespectful for the most part. But I have to say, I go to some of the toughest schools in the country and I don't really have any problems with that. But the Year 10 ones is an interesting challenge. It's kind of like, okay, how long is it going to take me to get a laugh? My favourite talk to give would be the 12s, and mainly because that's my final talk and I can have a bit of fun. They're a little bit older. They know me. They know kind of what information I'm going to present. So that's most probably my most fun talk to give. The most difficult one is the Year 11 by a mile, and that's because it's that bridging talk. And I've tried to make it more fun, and it's hard. It's hard because I'm talking about, cannabis. You can't really make much. You can't put fun bits in. But as long as I get to do that brain stuff at the end, which is really kind of
our
really
whole
fun
year
stuff.
group was having a bit of laugh at that,
Exactly.
so I'd say successful.
Yeah, it's a great way to kind of finish that talk off.
And what reactions do you get from students during your sessions?
Well, overwhelmingly very positive. Look, of course, there are some young people who just want to sit there with their arms folded and be very resistant. It doesn't happen very much. When it does, I will try to work very hard to try to, reach, if there's that group of young people, I think, oh no, I haven't reached you yet. I'm going to try to get you a smile. I'm trying to if I can do that, I'd be happy. But overwhelmingly, I think most young people are positive to what I do. Of course, you're going to get some young people who are not going to like it for whatever reason. Particularly young people who are very kind of entrenched in drug use. They don't want to hear anything. They don't want to hear anything bad. That said, I've spoken with some groups of homeless young people, high-risk young people who take a lot of drugs and, drink to excess. And for the most part, they like the talks even more because it's part of their lives. And if I can give them information to keep them and their friends a bit safer, they lap it up.
Hey there! Want more of the Grammar Grapevine? Make sure to follow us on Instagram at the Grammar Grapevine for all the behind-the-scenes content, updates, vlogs, episode clips, bloopers, and unseen videos you won't get anywhere else. That's at the Grammar Grapevine, and we'll see you there. What are some common myths that young people believe about drugs and alcohol, and how do you tackle them?
Well, that's how I start my Year 10 talk, because the absolute classic myth is how do you sober someone up? Because whenever I start and I say, young people think feeding them bread. Yeah. And as soon as I've said that, there are a whole pile of young people in the room who have fed bread to someone, or they've seen someone feed the bread. And that's why I start with that, because I can win them over with that. All of a sudden they go, oh, I've done that. And, then forcing someone to drink water. Those myths about how to sober someone up, they're some of the classic myths, and they're incredibly dangerous. Some of the things that young people do, and not just young people, older people as well, do to look after drunk people, are actually, in fact, very dangerous. So that's the kind of mythology I kind of like to bust. And of course, if you can bust a myth and at the same time give them some information about what to do, then you've kind of done a double whammy.
Break up the questions a bit. We're going to do some rapid fire questions.
Oh, goodness me.
Sweet or savoury?
Sweet.
Dogs or cats?
Cats.
Book or movie?
Oh, movie.
Morning or night?
I'd say morning.
Yeah? Pineapple on pizza, yes or no?
No.
Thank you. Audio book or physical book?
Physical book.
Now, back to why it's so important for young people to openly talk about drug and alcohol use. And do you have any standout, powerful stories or feedback from students that's really stuck with you?
Oh, look, there's so many. In terms of feedback, one of the nicest things that's ever happened to me was I had a phone call from a paramedic in Queensland on the Gold Coast, and they rang me and they said, are you the Paul Dillon who does drug talks? And I said, yes. And I said, look, we just have to tell you that this year at Schoolies we had so many young people who, when we were called to a place over the Schoolies weekend, they were calling us because of information you had given us. And they had friends who were saying, I'll put them under a cold shower or something, and they would say, no, you've got to do this, you've got to do that. And they had so many young people who basically turned around and said, no, that's not the way you do it. Paul Dillon said to do it this way. That the paramedics actually wanted to know who this person was. And that was very flattering.
Yeah.
And the other thing, which I think is interesting, I got an email from a young person once who was on exchange in Switzerland, and he went to a big party. He was, I think, 15, 16, went to a big party, and there were a whole pile of young people, other exchange students as well. He didn't know that, a whole pile of people. There were lots of people getting drunk, and he was looking after someone, and he got a bucket and he said, has anyone got a cloud of tissues? He yelled that. And all of a sudden someone in the other corner of the room said, do you have Paul Dillon? Then another corner, do you have Paul Dillon? And there were about 6 kids of exchange students, all from all over the country, who were all at this party, who all then kind of bonded over the fact that they'd heard me speak. at
Oh
their
my
own
God.
school. That was amazing. That was incredible. I think it was 6. There were 6 of them from all different parts of Australia who all happened to be at this party.
In Switzerland.
In Switzerland.
That is crazy.
It's unbelievable.
And what role do you think parents should play in educating teenagers about drugs and alcohol?
Parents should always, of course, be the key influences here, and they do have an influence. They might not actually necessarily talk to their kids about alcohol or drugs, but of course, if they're drinking, if they are responsible drinkers, they teach their kids to be responsible drinkers. But I think it is important to talk about the issue. But it can be really confronting for parents because, of course, there are some parents who've never had anything to do with other drugs. And, when a drug or vaping, for example, when that came up, so many parents didn't even know what a vape was, and so their kids...
Because I guess back then smoking would have been bigger than vaping.
Exactly. And they didn't understand that. A drug like ecstasy, 10, 15 years ago, there were a whole pile of parents who did not know what that drug was because it wasn't around when they were younger.
Yeah.
So it's a challenge for parents to keep up to date with everything. But, the best thing about a really good parent-child relationship is one where you communicate and you talk to each other. And this can be a difficult topic to talk about, but certainly all parents should.
Yeah.
Absolutely worth it.
And if you could sit your teenage self down in one of your talks, what would be the key message you'd want to tell him?
Well, I was the most boring teenager on the planet. I mean, I was so boring. If you speak to anyone that I went to school with, and I saw a girl I went to school with not long ago, and she said again, I've seen her about 3 or 4 times over the last 15 years, and every time I see her, she goes, "You are the one person that I went to school with who I thought would never, ever talk about this topic." I didn't hang out with people who drank alcohol. I didn't hang out with people who used drugs. And so for me, it was not a part of my world. I think if I'd sat in one of my talks, I would literally, and sometimes you see some young people, it'd be interesting in this year 10 group, but they sit there and as I say things, their jaw just goes.
Yeah, because it's so foreign to them.
It's so foreign. And they kind of go, do people really do that?
And you probably have the group of kids where they're just nodding their heads.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Or they just sit there kind of knowingly. But yeah, you get lots of people who just, and I would have been one of those people. I would have honestly thought, do people really do that? Because it just, my mum and dad never drank alcohol. I never saw alcohol in our house.
Yeah.
So for me, it was just something that wasn't part of my world. But yeah, I think to be quite honest, I think if I'd heard one of my talks, I'd have had to be stretchered out. I most probably would have fainted and someone would have had to come and collect me, taken me to a hospital. Because, yeah, some of the stories I tell, I would have gone, I would have been kind of shocked.
But I think it's good that you do tell people about that because if they're not exposed to it and then they get in that situation, they'll have no clue what to do.
Yeah, totally.
And has there been a particular moment or experience in your life where you knew, like, this is what I'm meant to be doing, working in drug and alcohol education?
Oh, that's happened so many times. So many times. I mean, it's when I get an email from a young person, I get so many DMs from young people saying, something like, "You saved a life tonight, I did this," and the young person outlines exactly what they did the evening. They called an ambulance and the paramedic said, "Thank you so much for doing that. That person would have died if you didn't." Those kind of things are phenomenal. And, there's something that they're so special. And I am very, 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 very lucky because I love what I do and I get really good feedback from young people. And it's kind of, I do something that hopefully can make a bit of a difference. And even if it's just potentially saved one person's life, then you know what? Then it's done something good.
Yeah. And what do you hope your legacy will be in the field of drug and alcohol education?
That's really hard because, as I said at the beginning, I don't know what I'm going to do when I finish. Like, will I just stop and then, DARTA just disappears? It'd be really sad if it did because, I've got a website that's got all this stuff, all this information on. And it's like, well, will it just kind of disappear after me or will there be some kind of legacy afterwards? I don't know. And you'd think at my age I would have worked that out, but I haven't yet. But that really is kind of the next step. What happens next?
Yeah. And what is your best piece of advice to the next generation of young people?
I suppose, I've said it many times, I think it's about whatever you choose to do, make sure you have the best information you possibly can so you can make an informed choice. never jump into something without doing at least a little bit of research on what you're doing. Because and it's about planning, making sure that you have some information before you do anything, because that's when things go wrong.
And where can people find and support you online?
Well, I'm on all the platforms, but young people, it's typically on Instagram. As you say, I've got now 53,600 followers on Instagram. I'm officially an influencer. So I think Instagram is where young people go. And I must say parents follow me on Instagram too, because often the little messages that I put up, then the parents can know exactly what I'm talking about too. So Instagram is most probably the best, but my website has all the information on a whole part of other things as well.
And your app.
And my app, yes, which you saw today for the first time, which I'm very proud of, because it is a pretty good app, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's not strictly speaking an app, but it works like an app.
I'd say it's an app.
Yeah, good.
Well, thank you so much for coming on. It's been great chatting to you, and I'm sure everyone who gets to listen to you today feels the same.
Can I just say, I've been interviewed by some of the best interviewers in the country. I mean, you won't know who some of these people are, but I've been interviewed by George Negus, Ray Martin, Kerry-Anne Kennelly, Jana Vent, who would you know? Carl Stefanovic, a whole pile. You're one of the best interviewers I've ever heard. No, that was wonderful. Thank you for making it so easy.
For reference, if you want access to any of the resources discussing drug and alcohol education, please check the podcast notes. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Grammar Grapevine. Make sure you're following us on your favourite podcast app and stay subscribed. There's so much more coming this semester. We'll see you in 2 weeks. Stay tuned.